Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Asymmetric Habits with my good friend Jonathan Pishner of Apex Counseling and I getting together talking about little small changes and actions or mindsets you can use to add to your life and greatly improve the outcomes of it. So, today's talk is a pretty specific one: why you should have a couples check in. And as our title says, if you can read it, seriously, put it on the schedule. Like this is like we are talking about an actual, pretty much scheduled, regular event that you and your loved ones can have in order to actually come together and just make things a lot better for your family, make things healthier, make things happier, and hopefully more successful all at the same time. So, my brother here, what is so for the people listening right now, what would be the first way that you would like essentially approach them with the topic of this and the value that it's going to provide for them?
Well, what's funny is the actual term I use a lot makes people want to reject it immediately. So I'm going to say it, and then hopefully people will stick around long enough to hear the case for why you should do this. Because oftentimes I call this the couple's business meeting, which is about
Oh
the
yeah.
unsexiest way you can frame this. Uh, but it captures the intent nicely because what happens in long-term relationships is people fall into patterns, and instead of addressing things when they are small and very easily solved, they let them turn into big problems. Like in anything, most problems can be solved very readily once they're small. uh, but then if you let them become big, then you need a lot of help. And sadly, a lot of people arrive at my office after they've needed a lot of help for a long time. So we've got like lots of work to do. But there's a lot of them that if they knew that you could solve a lot of this yourself 15 years prior, the would have gotten a lot out of that. So when I call a couples business meeting, is basically an organized scheduled time to sit down and check in on the health of the relationship and see if there are little things that need addressed, solved, or resolved that are not that wouldn't be resolved on their own just with time.
Mhm.
And I don't remember what made me stumble on this as such an important thing, but uh, these days the way I think about it and the way I pitch it. So like I have a number of people that work for me. So all the counselors that work for me, we have a 1 hour meeting scheduled every 2 weeks. We might not use that entire time, but that's our time to figure out, do they have problems with cases? Is there problems with their billing? Are they struggling somehow in their documentation? And just making sure all of the little problems can't become big. I meet with them 2 hours a month, basically. And what I started realizing was couples don't have an organized time for even 10 minutes a month a lot of the time. And so no wonder problems become malignant and horrible. And there's numerous ways to structure this that we'll get into, but the main pitch is if you are not scheduling time to talk about the tiny problems in the relationship and solve them, you are basically agreeing, yes, I would much rather have gigantic problems later than solve
Mhm.
these tiny problems now.
Right. And that's so huge. And that is what basically like common relationship math will lead to. It, like you're saying, just there's no scheduled time. And that's because like the way relationships essentially work is almost everything else shall be more important than or receive priority, I should say. Almost everything else shall receive priority than us having regular, like consistent times to get together and talk about things. Um, I said like busy schedules or family demands or even like personal goals, etc. All these things can like keep pushing other things away. And if both partners are either focused on what they have to do or not wanting to insert themselves because their partner is busy and they know it's not busy, there's that feeling of, oh, this will be inconvenient, like this is going to be an inconvenience again. Like that's almost always blown so out of proportion because this can be done in such a like such a relatively small time frame compared to the whole week. Like you said, staff meeting can be an hour. I mean, sure, this could be an hour long, maybe a couple times every 2 weeks again, or maybe a month, or it could be like a 10-minute thing every week, but making it actually happen is where so many people just keep kicking that can down the road, and then it, just like you said, it never actually happens. And I mean, you mentioned small problems becoming big ones, and of course you see a lot of that with what you do. Aside from that picture though, too, it could also be. I mean, this is a problem as well, but it could also just be a like a decrease in maybe just close list or up. I don't even know what to call it, but being less updated on what's happening in your relationship or on your partner. So you just don't know as much of what's going on because you're both busy, and that just decreases maybe the feeling of closeness a little bit. Um, so there's just a lot of scale that can go with this, and how much this can quickly improve it. It's like, I mean, it's almost like seasoning with cooking. A little bit can go a long way in this if you keep it consistently. So keep the relationship healthy by regularly talking about it, things that are coming up, problems, take care of everything. Like one more thing that I think is huge with it is this should also provide a much like a more neutral space um to talk about things, especially if there's anything problematic. It's not like, I think if couples think they're going to get into something, sensitive or confrontational again, just because they're talking about a problem or something that's bothering them, you automatically think fight. We're going to fight. We're going to argue. Instead, if you have an actually scheduled check-in with each other, that can be a time to address things. You address it safer.
As you're saying that, man, I wish I'd have put that because I just shot my own YouTube video on this right before I got on this. And I forgot to say that because what you're saying is important because what couples do that's destructive that I forgot to mention is there's oftentimes not a good time if you have a difficulty with your partner because like, okay, do you hit them with it right after they get into the door after their long day at work? Well, that's no good. Do you do it when they get up on Saturday morning and they're all chipper and they're in a great mood? Well, yeah, that's no good. Do you do it while they're fixing dinner for you? That's no good. But having the organized time where we have mutually agreed, hey, here is when we bring up problems, prevents getting into a position where then your partner has a risk of being like, I can't believe you would bring this up after my hard day at work. Like it prevents a potential problem. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm sad I forgot to mention that in my own video.
Now you just have to redo the whole thing.
I will not be doing that.
Which is exactly what you should just make the action and just go for it from there. That's true. But that part is so big. I think is so often the only reason we don't bring it up is either it's just some sort of fear of like how much is the partner going to push back on it? How much am I going to bother them with this? Or even a more like self-directed fear, like, oh, this is important to me, but it's probably not that big of a deal, so I don't want to bring it up for that reason. And like,
well, and because stability feels like safety. They are not the same thing, but they feel like the same thing. So when a system has reached some level of stability, we even have a phrase for it. We say, don't rock the boat. We believe that the stable system is a safe system. That is not true because keeping these minor problems absolutely leads to eventual unsafety. But a lot of people don't want to risk the present day stability. And that's actually one of the barriers of getting into this and me pitching this to my couples that I do therapy with, because they're so afraid of creating any level of instability, especially when the therapist isn't present there to help them with it. That instability feels terrifying.
yes. Okay, so I would like you, because you're probably, I feel like you're going to have better tools to help people here. Kind of like explain to people how they can approach their partner with starting this. But one thing I want to say before that is I do think it's highly important, for anybody who wants to start this in their relationship to start it from the very beginning with the intention and messaging to make it a regular and consistent action. So you
Yes,
don't want
on
to.
the calendar.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, every X number of weeks, months, whatever. And if it can be the same time, like even better. Consistency is great. But because that will give it a feeling, like that will give it a safer feeling of, okay, this is something we're going to start doing for us. If you leave that part out, and it's just, hey, I think we should have a check-in maybe every once in a while, or I think we should have a check-in for this. If you kind of leave that part open about it being like regular and consistent and something you want to do all the time, it brings up a lot more of that, hey, we need to talk feeling
Mhm.
that terrifies people. you, you know
Even that phrase.
Exactly. It's like, so having it coming up with like, no, this is something like a time that I want to set aside, that I want to do consistently. It's like, oh, okay, this is an
Mhm.
actual joint action. This makes more sense. This isn't threatening. This is an actual action rather than a one-time meeting, one-time talk, which
Mhm.
if the partner is surprised by it, that can automatically make them a little defensive about it. So,
Yeah. So your original question was, okay, if I'm the partner who wants to do this, how do I bring it up to my person
mm,
and have them be ready to do that? Uh, well, I'm a firm believer in not doing more work than you have to. So depending on what would work better, you don't even have to make the pitch. You can actually just direct them to this podcast episode or to my own YouTube video on the matter and like let me make the pitch because
there we go.
yeah, like I mean why bother doing extra work? So if me making the pitch will work better, by all means just like literally use this content and be like, "Hey, please watch this because I think this would be a good idea." And then cool, you're done. But sometimes that's no good for who knows how many reasons. Uh I don't know that I have like wonderful advice in general because, as I was mentioning, I, as the couples relationship expert, have trouble convincing people who know they need couples help to actually do this. Uh, so I want to like capture the fact that this is challenging. And I think this is challenging because we have a lot of sociocultural myths about how love relationships work, and many times they're not even spoken. They're just kind of like in the background. But one of our cultural myths seems to be that if two people love each other enough, the problems will just somehow magically work themselves out.
hmm That's a big one.
And yeah, that's really huge. And the receiving partner from this information, if somebody says, "Hey, I want to do this couples check-in or a love check or a couples business meeting, call it whatever you want," um, the receiving partner has a risk of feeling a little attacked, as if they are not living up to their thing, and oh, my partner wants to have a weekly meeting about how I'm inadequate or something. And that's of course absolutely not the intent, but that is oftentimes how it's received. So I think the only general advice I would give is be prepared to gently pitch this and be prepared to do so multiple times. Um, I should have been tracking how many times I generally have to pitch this to couples before they'll actually do it. It has to average 3 or greater.
Mm.
I'm sure I pitch this at least 3 times or more on average before people actually do it. Uh, And oftentimes, my second, third, fourth, and fifth pitch is, "Hey, just so you know, this problem that we're now solving that could have been solved 8 weeks ago, this is a great one that would have been great for the love check, and it would have been solved 8 weeks ago instead of being a big problem now." And so I kind of gently remind people, "Hey, this would have actually been great here. Are you sure we can't do this?" And that's okay to do as the love partner as well, as long as you are gentle. If you try and make it a gotcha moment, that will never work. But if you're like, "Hey, remember that thing I pitched? Like this maybe would
Mhm.
actually be really good if we did it this way."
I feel like a key would be focusing on the potential positive benefits of it. too. At least that's just the way my brain has always worked with things. Is yeah, because it is a time to bring up problems, issues, things like that. But all of those things are with the intent to create improvements. I mean, it's because you
Right.
want to make things better, and and just like you're saying, like the other person, like or like it might come across defensive, it might come across as I'm going to hear if I'm inadequate. But if instead it's like, all of this is intending to figure out how to make things better for us, to make our relationship better, to um, just build how much we know about each other, support each other. If you come across it with like all the positive benefits, like the as being the true selling point and the true purpose of this, I feel like
Mhm.
it's a lot more. It almost comes across as more motivational to your partner that way. Like you said, there still might be the this is because I mean, yeah, like in the end, especially with you, especially if you call it the couples business meeting, it definitely has that little bit of like, oh, I don't know, this is kind of cheesy. I don't know about.
I realized how horrible that sounds, by the way. Like all of my couples were like, dude, you got to change the name. I was like, I can't think of a better one. Finally, one of my clients is the one who came up with Love Check.
So, um, but yeah, but like focusing on the positives, I think is a huge part of where you can get from this. And I mean, like, and you can also, I mean, lump other stuff into this too, as long as it doesn't change the purpose too much. But like, let's say it's this while it's also, maybe.
Actually, you're getting into a different thing. Let me tell you where I was going to go with
Oh,
this
okay.
because you're already getting there.
Oh, okay. Well, neat.
Uh,
Preview.
I have encouraged couples often once they get used to the standard issue love check, like, hey, are we good? Are we loving each other well enough? That it is wise to have a couple of different types of these scheduled depending on the what the couple deals with. Uh, if couples have children, having a parenting business meeting is good. Or if one person struggles with a chronic condition, like having a brief check-in related to that, like, hey, did you remember to do the doctor? Hey, don't forget, I'm now sensitive to this food. You accidentally put it in dinner on Tuesday evening. Um, so after people get good at the original one, figuring out a couple of little other check-ins depending on what people are dealing with is actually really wise because then we can deal with, at our, I don't know, Monday one, are we loving each other well enough? Are you receiving what you need from me? And then on Wednesday, we can be like, all right, uh, Susie's getting bad grades at school. How are we going to approach that this month? So I feel like that's roughly kind of where you were getting ready to get to. So
Yeah.
yes, you,
No,
you
yeah.
can absolutely do different types of these.
Exactly. Like, yeah, adding in, financial part to it, if it's
Yeah.
about, how you guys are gonna do it may make any changes to the budget. But yeah, little
Yeah.
things like
So
just to
some of
just
my best friends do a financial once every month, maybe or something. I can't remember what it is, but
yeah, so I was just gonna say there's a lot of versions of it. I said a lot of things you can cover. So just make
Mhm.
sure you're still focused. Don't let yourself fall into an accidental trap of no longer focusing on the relationship, which is the main goal of the whole thing. Um,
Yes,
so
and matter of fact, let me co-sign that with a great big red pen because what couples will accidentally come up with is, oh, but the kids are more important than us.
yes. Hmm.
And my response is that depends an awful lot on how you measure. Because let me propose to you that children of two miserable parents are not going to be any happier than children who like have happy parents. Like that's not going to work. Uh, and so you absolutely have to care for the love relationship if you want your children to be happy. Because if you think that your unhappy love relationship is invisible to them, there is no polite way for me to tell you that is foolish. So I'll just have to say that is completely foolish and absurd and stop it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I don't know, but like, what else do you want to add to this? I think we've actually covered a lot in just 20 minutes, like bringing up a lot of ideas that people may not have thought about. So, like to me, I'm gonna I'm gonna keep beating this a little bit, but I think the biggest surprise here is that it's a new way to structure something so important to people that they typically think is going to just happen when it needs to happen. Like, just like you said,
Yeah.
this feeling of, oh, I'm not going to bring this up until it's an issue, or we'll wait, or it's embarrassing to talk about this type of stuff. Making it
Mhm.
actually come out may seem crazy, may seem out of character, but once you get it going and you actually start seeing the benefits and how easier it is to cover things, you'll see how much, like, that right there will give you probably the energy to just go ahead and keep up with it, or at least like the desire to keep up with it.
Yeah. And let me patch a hole here that will absolutely happen if I don't help out with this. Because as soon as I say, "Hey, get together with your partner, check in with them," but I give no further structure, there's too much. There's too many things that can look like. So I like to give people a basic structure to start with,
Oh, awesome.
and then modify it as much as you want or need to. But a good starting point that I like to start people with is uh, just dealing with two questions. And if you're the person who pitched this and your partner's just along for the ride, you can do both questions. Question number one is, have I done a good job this week of showing you the love, caring, and affection that you need? End of question. And if the answer is no, oh, what could I have done differently? And then the second question in reverse is, would you be willing to hear some of the ways that, like, you could care for me better and I would receive your love better? And that's it. That is a wonderful start. Because it'll take a while to just get good at that before you start trying to get more complicated. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you what couples are vulnerable to so that people can try not to do it. What most couples are vulnerable to is they try and do too much. The reason I suggest these should be 15 or 20 minutes is because that kind of makes it so it's hard to get into too many things. If your partner expresses one thing that you could do a little bit better and you express one thing they could do a little bit better, that's wonderful. Done. Meeting over, clang the gavel, and be done. A matter of fact, even just having those two things is possibly a bit much. And then the second thing people are vulnerable to, instead of trying to do too much, they'll try and deal with something that's bigger than they're ready to get into. Like I'll do a common one. Very common answer in one of the initial ones is, we're not having the amount of sex I want to have. Which, fine, that's fair. But that is an extraordinarily complicated issue because libido and desire is impacted by so many things that, like, yeah, you're saying one thing, but it captures 127 different areas of life. And that's extraordinarily difficult for couples to manage on a first try like this. So I wouldn't do things that are going to be extraordinarily complicated. I would do things like, hey, you started to get to where when I do things for you, you forget to say thank you. I'd really appreciate it if you would say thank you when I do things for you. Because that's easy. That's relatively simple. But couples will oftentimes be vulnerable for, like, going for the thing that's biggest in their minds, which that is very fair.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a complex issue, like, I hate your mom and I don't want to have to spend any more time with her, and it's somebody who, like, goes and visits their mom every day. Like, I mean, there's a lot to unpack where the couple is not ready for that on meeting number 1, 2, or 3. That's for once you've really got some experience in resolving these problems.
So, I mean, man, that was a lot of information, but really good stuff. I mean, yeah. So to put that as like a simple bullet point is, once you can get the meeting started, give it just some very small, almost test runs. They count, but yeah, just focus on having good meetings where you're actually starting to break down the communication barrier, talk about things, and then hopefully be mindful of whether they're happening so that you can catch up if they are the next few meetings. And as the success and as the comfort and belief in it grows, start approaching bigger topics, which are probably
Very
being
much so.
screwed by the smaller ones, like you said.
Yes.
So yeah, that's really good stuff. So, all right, brother. Do you have? You just went through all of that. Do you want to read? Like, is there anything else you want to re-summarize?
Let me think. What have we missed here? Uh, so couples should definitely do the meeting. We captured a couple of the barriers. Oh, let's talk about this for a minute, because this goes into sociocultural myths um, as well. One of the things that happens a lot is we'll have our couples check in, a thing will get agreed to, and there's an accidental belief about what should happen. Let's say we go into our love check and I agree, yes, you're right. I've been forgetting to say thank you. I will do better about that. And maybe I do. What is not happening is you are not signing a 50-year contract to never ever slip up again. And sadly, sometimes an agreement will get made and people will forget that their partner is, one of those tedious humans who forgets things or who lets life get in the way, instead of a computer who will remember a command forever. And they'll make up that this is a forever contract, or worse, they'll be completely closed off to, if something is not going well, renegotiating what is agreed to. Because let's say we deal with a big one. We sit down, we talk through, okay, our career trajectories are in a way where we've got to decide who's we're going to prioritize. And we sit down, we agree to it, and that works out for a while. And then it's 5 years later. Here's what you don't want to do. Person comes and says, hey, yeah, we made this agreement, but this is not working out. What you don't want to do is act like they have signed an ironclad contract and be like, no, look, we sat down and we agreed this is the way it is. That is horrifyingly destructive, because humans change and their needs change and their lives change and our environment changes and everything about us changes. So it is important to sit down and do this, but it is also important to not view what you're working on and what you're agreeing to as something that is then the forever contract that you then get to like handcuff your partner with. This is meant to be a means by which you can continually renegotiate the relationship as necessary for both persons. Happily, this barrier that I'm discussing doesn't happen terribly often, but it happens often enough to warrant discussing, especially to persons that I'm proposing get into this and they don't necessarily have me there to guide the entire process. When people are in therapy with me, it's a little easier for me to guide the process more fully. This is advice I'm lobbing out into the universe and hoping goes well. So I definitely want to make sure to patch that hole as well.
That's huge. Especially, yeah, just bringing it all back to the goal is to consistently improve over time. Because even the word renegotiate, I think, is almost hijacked culturally as a we think of negotiations almost as, again, another icky, too professional type of thing. So like you're saying, like I would almost use more layman's terms of just like re-updating, almost just like continuing to just continuing to improve that. Like I don't know why. There's some reason that the
No,
word
no, you're right. Like I use terms, like my natural bias is to use terms that are extraordinarily clear, without regard, which is funny being the therapist, of course, without regard for people's emotional responses to them, especially in the large format like this. Like when I'm one-on-one with somebody, it's much different. But especially when I'm speaking to a group of somewhere between 2 and 200 million people, who knows how many people see this? I'm really bad about using clarity terms as opposed to things people will be able to like emotionally digest sometimes,
It's
which
just
is a
funny how that
hilarious
happens. Like, we know
barrier
what
for a
the word
therapist.
means. Yeah, it's funny how that happens. We know what a word means, but it can still like conjure like different emotional responses. But
Yeah.
really, I mean, everything you said comes back to what we talked about at the very, very beginning. I mean, a lot of it is attached to that, where so much of this is to move past those natural biases that we have. And like you said, one of the biggest ones from the very beginning was this belief that when you're in a relationship, things should just remain unspoken and happen unspoken. Like you said, like there's like I mean the point of the relationship is going to be okay if this is a either if this either is a healthy relationship or is trying to be a healthy relationship, that's going to mean that both partners are in it to because they want both partners to be happy and they want the best for both partners. Like it's not going to be a healthy relationship if you don't have at least that common core dynamic. Um, so with that, I would it would be logical to assume with that as the end goal that if even if you wish that your partner just did something or knew something, like you felt
Mhm.
like it should be automatic, but you also feel like it can be improved, it should at least make some sense. Like, okay, maybe like this is something worth talking about and approaching because they're not just getting it. And then
Yep.
just like you said about the ironclad agreement, like, okay, if they talk, they're receptive, they were literally clueless about it. Like either they never crossed their mind, or maybe they thought they were doing it and expressing it, but it actually turns out that so they think they are, but it's not coming across that way to you. So you get to cover that ground. But again, going over it once isn't going to necessarily mean okay, this is it, and just so that way it can stay open in the communications. Like tell your partner if it's improving, or
Mhm.
tell your partner when something's improving, but if it's not, don't feel like you shouldn't bring it up again. Like I said,
Mhm.
like just consistently bring it up to consistently have things go on the good side. And like you said, I mean, we're humans. Part of that is also the effect that multiple touches has on our memory and our behavior. Like you said, like human versus computer. We hear something once, we're better at it for a little bit. But the
Yep.
more often we hear it, the more often we get to practice it. That's how actual learning occurs, and we can actually make the changes in our behavior more long-standing.
Mhm. Now, before we end, final pitch on scheduling. I deliberately saved this for the end as the final bookend because people will still sometimes resist scheduling this. So I'm going to punch up my calendar for next week and look at something. So let's see. I have a person coming in for a final job interview. I have 2 supervision sessions. I have supervision with a different supervisee. I have 25 client spots. I have content meeting with you. I've got 3 different martial arts classes on my calendar, a business networking meeting. All of that's in there. If I say to my own spouse, I will not schedule time with you, I have now just said everything on my calendar is more important than you. So let me deeply, deeply encourage, please schedule time to work on your relationship. Please make it just as sovereign as everything from your CrossFit session to your work time to everything else. Treat it like it is as important as you say that it is. I trust that you believe it's important, but show it through actually scheduling time to work on it.
Mhm. Yes, sir. Big drop.
Yes, my mic hangs here, so I can't drop it.
Smack.
Gotta slap it.
So, all right, brother. So as always, had a good time coming up here. I feel like this is definitely something that's going to help can help people. Even just these thoughts of opening up more about things to improve with their and talk about with their significant other. So as always, everybody, thanks for listening. Give this a share with anybody you think will get some value out of it. Again, we're in the podcast world as Asymmetric Habits on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And as a heads up here, not entirely sure how these live broadcasts are going to go from here in the future. Just so not surprising, because the software used for this is completely changing. Actually, it already happened this month. So at next week at the content meeting, JP and I mentioned, we will figure out kind of how we're going to do this. I mean, the podcast part is definitely going to continue. We're just literally have no idea right now how a split live broadcast like this might work out. So so make sure you follow us on the podcast spectrum so you can get your asymmetric habits fixes in.
But because worlds change and people change, we will deal with it at our scheduled meeting time because we view this podcast as important. Second mic drop.
That's right. All right, everybody. Catch you guys later. Have a great weekend.
See y'all.